We're not going to disappoint those of you who want to see a large O-scale layout. Ed Rappe's Pennsylvania Railroad themed layout is located in Virginia. Ed is a longtime O-scale modeler, having transitioned over time from N to HO and finally to O-scale. Ed's 2,200 square foot penultimate layout is built in a custom designed basement and is up to the task of representing the horseshoe curve in the King of Scales. Set in the transition era year of 1952, the layout features a prototypically accurate mix of steam and diesel. Ed was kind enough to open his layout for a day's filming, and he provides in-depth commentary on its modeling and its construction. Ed, thank you for inviting us to your layout. Can you tell us what is the theme of your layout?
The railroad is set in central Pennsylvania, 1952. In fact, the summer of 1952, as that is the last year the T-1444s ran in revenue service. I model a stretch of the Pennsy Middle Division from Huntington, Pennsylvania to Altoona, and a stretch up the horseshoe curve from Altoona to Gallitzin on the Pittsburgh Division. I also have two branch lines on the model. The first and most interesting is the Tyrone and Clearfield coal branch. In the real world, it served over 60 coal mines. On mine, we have 4, but it generates a lot of revenue, traffic, and interest. It can be operated independently of the main line. Sometimes when I'm home alone, I'll just run the branch line. Other times, we run the middle division, almost like a rail fan event. I also have a little segment of the Huntington and Broadtop Mountain. It was a small branch line from Huntington to Bedford, and twice a day, every day, 2 milk cars were exchanged with the Pennsy that went on to Harrisburg and further to Philly. It adds interest to the passenger train operations. I have main line running, branch line running, and a helper district. Depending on how many crew members we have, we can go up to maybe 10 to 12 operators. Sometimes it's just 2 of us. Either way, it offers a lot of fun and enjoyment.
This is one of the largest layouts that I've ever seen. How long has it been under construction?
In 2005, I retired from the D.C. area, and we had a house custom built down in Williamsburg. First 2 years, I did honeydew things around the house and designed the layout using AutoCAD. Third Planet was the actual software product. It took me about 4 months to design the layout. We did a lot of iterative design, trading off aisle width to minimum radius and gradients. In the basement, I have approximately 2,200 square feet allocated to the railroad. It's an open bench construction with curved edges. I tried to avoid dead ends, and we do walk-around control using DCC. The track is Flex Track, commercially available from Atlas for the Code 148. I used Old Pullman or Micro Engineering 125 for the branch line, and a little Code 100 micro engineering for some sidings. The turnouts were hand-laid using components castings from right away. In some cases, for curved turnouts, I learned how to make my own, but I found it was mostly for reasons of economy. With 120 turnouts, I didn't want to go out and buy commercial ones, and I found I could lay them within as little as 4 hours a turnout. The structures on the railroad are a combination of commercial kits, scratch-built, and more recently, some ready-built available structures from Woodland Scenics. And with little weathering and customizing of signage, they blend well together for the era I'm modeling.
If I had to characterize you, I'd call you Mr. Pensy. What have you done with the layout to duplicate the Pennsylvania Railroad?
Once I chose the region of Pennsylvania I wanted to model, went out and hiked around, checked out the areas, bought as many books about the area with photographs to try to capture the critical elements that convey what the Pennsy was about in the time frame I'm modeling. The middle division, one of the key elements are the many stone arch bridges over the Juniata River. And I did get to model one recently. It's got the characteristic Pennsy hairpin railings. It just speaks Pennsylvania. The other key element on the middle division that I've tried to incorporate is the interchange with the Tyrone and Clearfield branch and the Bald Eagle branch at Tyrone, Pennsylvania. And it was done in the form of a Y between the main line and the branch. And it comes in real handy for turning the power as well as it makes an interesting look. On the Pittsburgh division, the key element I wanted to capture was horseshoe curve. And my earlier railroad had a 3-track horseshoe curve the wrong way. In other words, it spiraled up and to the right. This time I had a big enough basement that I could go with a 4-track climb, 2.2%, and it climbs counterclockwise to the left. Other elements on the horseshoe curve, of course, is the classic gift shop that was at the base of the curve. First time I visited that when I was coming out of grad school, and I hunted around to find out what that gift shop looked like in 1952 and scratch-built a model so it captures the elements of it. It's a little difficult because there were at least 3 versions of the gift shop, and it was tough finding a picture set exactly in the time frame I was modeling. Again, another element is the signage that relates to horseshoe curve. And as you first drive into horseshoe curve back in that day and age, one of the key signs was for probably the best Italian restaurant in the whole Altoona area, Ercolani's. And I was able to go out on the internet and make a copy of that sign and included it along the roadside up to the horseshoe curve and gift shop. At the top of the curve at the tunnels at Gallitzin. Mine are quite modified and downsized, but it does capture the element of you're cresting the Alleghenies and you're disappearing just before the westbound to Pittsburgh descent. Pennsy modelers in O-scale are very fortunate in that virtually every major class of Pennsy steam and diesel power has been available over the last 30 to 40 years, and they're pretty darn good models. They capture the look of the Pennsy, and they run very well right out of the box. I do add details to try to capture the look of a specific locomotive, changing lost wax castings and things like that to match photographic evidence. The cars and freight cars and passenger equipment, we have a real good selection for the transition steam era available in O. Some of it was kit built, some of it's brass, but a lot of my, for example, my refrigerator rolling stock is rather low-cost Intermountain kits for the Pacific Fruit Express reefers. And recently, Atlas has come out with quad hoppers. And I needed a lot of hoppers on the railroad, couldn't afford all brass ones. I needed 90 hoppers to round out the roster. Atlas came in just in time with the Pennsy H21 quads I can use on the branch line. I also have some Lionel conversions. Recently, Lionel, 3-rail Lionel has been introducing scale details, and I have a number of reefers, gondolas, and tank cars from Lionel mixed in with rather high-end brass.
Ed, this isn't your first time to the rodeo. You've been in O-scale for some years. You've also had previous large O-scale layouts. Tell us what you've learned along the way.
Of course, I didn't start out in O-scale. In fact, my first railroad was N-scale in a spare bedroom when I was in grad school. I was an H.O. Pennsy modeler for several years, and then in 1971, I ran across an article in Model Railroader by John Armstrong about his O-scale layout. He lived in the D.C. area. I called him up, and he invited me over. Seeing O-scale up close and personal, which was rarely before, I saw it in hobby shops, but really never saw it running, hooked me. The mass, the sound, the feel of these trains. H.O. is beautifully detailed, but O-scale's just got this weight and mass, and it's not delicate. As the prototype. This current layout is the 4th in a series of O-scale layouts. The first one was very simple, 3 times around loop, where I could just learn how to lay track, get my early kit building locomotives and freight cars running. And as soon as I had the opportunity to get a slightly larger basement, I started with a completely new track plan. But again, centered on a Pennsylvania theme. The ideas I incorporated in this layout are a culmination of all the lessons learned over the earlier 3, and especially of being around some pretty sharp people like John Armstrong, Ted Stepik, and even some of the young guys like Chris Smith and John Sethian. Each time I run across or visit a layout, I come away with takeaway points that I hope to incorporate in mine. Probably the biggest takeaway from my earlier layouts was that we have a lot of friends in the area that are in O-scale. In fact, we have a lot of HO gauge guys that join in with us on operating nights. And I ran into a problem between operators and viewers. We had a lot of rail fans, and we also had operators walking in the aisles, and the earlier aisles were just too tight to support both. So when I designed this layout, in fact, when I designed the basement, I made sure it was wide enough that I could have at least a 3-foot aisle width, in many places 4 foot. It makes it a lot more comfortable. The other lesson learned here is you're going to spend a lot of time under the bench work. And in this particular layout room, I was able to carpet the floor using secondhand carpet from offices that were tossing them out. They were free, carpet tiles. But it really made it comfortable for both standing and also especially working under the railroad. I use open grid construction. I'm not a fan of L-girder because I like to keep the underside clearance as high as possible. And my top of the plywood base is 47 inches, and the railroad climbs at one point to the overhead loops at Gallitzin to 7 foot 4 inches. So most guys can walk around the layout without ducking.
When you moved south from the Washington, D.C. area and left the O-scale group there, I'll bet you didn't expect to find other two-rail O-scalers nearby. Yet you found some right in this residential complex. Can you tell us about it?
When we moved to Williamsburg, we actually came down with one of the O-scalers from the Washington area, Jim Taverna, and he's building a Pensy-themed layout based on the Northern Central. But we were really fortunate that between Jim's house, about a half a mile from mine, and another was the president of NMRA, John Roberts. John was a C&O modeler and particularly creative. So in a span of about a mile, we had 3 two-rail O-scalers in a golf course gated community. Turns out we have a model railroad club in the group, in the area, with 54 members. There are 3 O-scalers, two-railers, about a dozen HO gauge guys, 5 or 6 N-scale guys, and a lot of Lionel folks. It turns out that we share a common interest. We love trains. And on work nights, we have Lionel guys, HO gauge guys, N guys, doing scenery work, building structures, painting backdrops. That's common to all the scales. And they enjoy coming over and working on the O-scale stuff. And I enjoy going over and working on their HO gauge stuff as well. So you're not alone if you're an O-scale. There's a large group. In the Middle Atlantic region, we're particularly active. We have swap meets at the Strasburg Fire Hall that we like to go to 3 times a year. And we do round-robin meets with the folks that we left back in D.C., and now they've moved to Saturday afternoons where they actually grill hamburgers and run trains. So O-scale, although it's not to be seen often in hobby shops, is out there, and particularly probably the best place to go see it is to one of these yard sale shows like at the Strasburg Fire Hall. It's unbelievable how much O-scale equipment's been produced over the years, and because it's well built, it stands up to that period of time and affords us reasonable equipment and good operation.
Your layout looks to be nearing a stage where all of the landforms and basic scenery will be complete. What's in the future?
First off, the layout will never be complete. It's not my objective. It's the journey, not the destination. And I try to vary with the things I work on, detailing brass locomotives or building a wood structure kit. It adds interest. Right now, the focus has been on getting all the ground covered up so that visitors don't see bare bench work. At this point, my highest priority focus is to complete the town scenes. Once a year, we have an open house for the neighborhood. We've pulled in as many as 200 folks on a Sunday afternoon. And the first thing when they walk in, they like to see the people, the buildings, the structures, especially the things that convey the sense of the time frame, like the Burma Shave signs along the roadway or the mail pouch tobacco barn on the hill. And so those are the kinds of things I focus on because the non-model railroaders that visit look for that and seem to enjoy that. Coal mines are a major feature on the branch line, and at this point I have 1 model completed and 3 yet to build. Fortunately, there's some really great kits available from BTS for coal tipples, and in 2017, one of my priorities is to build a coal tipple for the coal mining community of Roberts, Pennsylvania. I should add that Roberts was named after John Roberts, the fellow I mentioned earlier, who's since passed away. And he helped influence me on how to do the company town related industry.